You were told you were smart, or you were told you weren't. Someone, a teacher, a parent, a test score, decided. And somewhere along the way, you believed them. But here's what nobody told you. The people who decided were working with a definition of intelligence that scientists have been arguing about for over 100 years. And the argument is not even close to settled. What you think intelligence is almost certainly wrong. And what it actually is will change the way you see yourself forever. Let's start with where our modern idea of intelligence came from. 1904. A French psychologist named Alfred Binet was asked by the French government to design a test, not to measure intelligence, to identify children who needed extra help in school. That's it. That was the only purpose. Binet himself explicitly warned that his test should not be used to label children as permanently limited. He said this clearly, in writing, and then the world ignored him completely. His test was taken to America, modified, turned into the IQ test, and for the next century, a single number was used to define how smart a human being was. A test designed to help struggling children became a label that followed people for life. But here's where it gets scientifically interesting, because IQ does measure something real, something called the G factor, general intelligence, first identified by psychologist Charles Spearman in 1904. The G factor is the observation that people who do well in one cognitive area tend to do well in others. Verbal ability, spatial reasoning, processing speed, working memory, they correlate, and that correlation is what IQ tests partially capture. IQ scores do predict academic performance, certain job performances, some life outcomes. The science on this is real. IQ is not meaningless. But here is where it gets complicated. IQ captures one dimension of something that has many dimensions, like measuring the size of a city only by the length of its longest street. You're measuring something real, but you're missing almost everything. In 1983, a Harvard psychologist named Howard Gardner published a theory that changed everything. He proposed that intelligence is not one thing, it is multiple things. He identified what he called multiple intelligences: linguistic intelligence, the ability to use language powerfully; logical mathematical intelligence, the ability to reason and solve problems; spatial intelligence, the ability to think in 3 dimensions; musical intelligence, the ability to perceive and create patterns in sound; bodily kinesthetic intelligence, the ability to use your body with extraordinary skill; interpersonal intelligence, the ability to understand other people deeply; intrapersonal intelligence, the ability to understand yourself; naturalist intelligence, the ability to recognize patterns in the natural world. Gardner's theory is influential, but it is also debated. Many scientists argue that his intelligences are better described as talents or abilities rather than separate forms of intelligence. The scientific debate continues, but his core insight, that we have been measuring human potential through a dangerously narrow window, that insight has transformed education around the world. And then came something that changed everything again. In 1995, Daniel Goleman published research on emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and use emotions effectively in yourself and in others. Studies have shown that emotional intelligence predicts success in relationships, leadership, and well-being in ways that IQ alone cannot. The most successful people in almost every field are not always the highest IQ scorers. They are often the ones who understand people, who regulate their own emotions, who read a room, who know when to speak and when to listen. The surgeon with the steadiest hands and the coldest nerve under pressure. The leader who makes the team feel seen. The teacher who changes a life with one sentence at exactly the right moment. That is intelligence, and no IQ test in the world measures it. But here is the most important thing, the thing that should genuinely change how you live. For most of the 20th century, scientists believed intelligence was fixed. You were born with it. You couldn't change it. The research of the last 30 years has shown this to be fundamentally wrong. The concept is called neuroplasticity. Your brain is not a fixed machine. It is a living, changing, adapting structure that physically rewires itself in response to what you do. Every time you learn something difficult, new neural connections form. Every time you practice a skill, the neural pathways strengthen. Every time you push past what you think you can do, your brain physically changes. This is not motivational language. This is verified neuroscience. Carol Dweck at Stanford University spent decades studying this and found that people who believe their intelligence can grow, the ones she called growth mindset people, consistently outperform those who believe intelligence is fixed, regardless of starting ability. Not because believing it makes it true, but because believing it changes the behavior, and the behavior changes the brain. So, what is intelligence really? It is not a number. It is not a test score. It is not what your teacher decided about you when you were 9 years old. Intelligence is the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, the ability to solve problems you have never seen before, the ability to understand other people, the ability to understand yourself, the ability to keep going when everything in you wants to stop. You have been measuring yourself against one tiny piece of the most complex thing in the known universe, your own mind. And the most intelligent thing you can do right now is decide that you are not finished yet, that the brain you have today is not the brain you have to keep, that intelligence is not something you have, it is something you do every day, every choice, every moment you decide to stay curious instead of certain. The most intelligent people who ever lived all shared one thing: not the highest test scores, not the best memories. They never stopped asking questions. Neither should you. Share this with someone who was told they weren't smart enough. They need to hear this today.